And you can catch us anytime on Jersey First TV, where you can check us out on YouTube, hit that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, get Bridging the Gap, get Real Talk with Fernando, or you can check us out on NJ on demand anytime. You can also check out jerseyfirst.org, where you can sign up for the newsletter and sign the pledge to put Jersey first always. And we got another great show lined up for you. Can't wait for it. But Stephen, before we get into that, how was your week? First week back of school. What's going on? How are we doing?
Whew. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. Law school, I don't know if anybody's told you this, AJ, or the listeners. Unrelenting.
Mm.
It's like you go 100 miles an hour, you hit a spike strip on finals week, your tires get blown out, it's a mess, you don't know what's going on. You finally come to a slow stop, and then all of a sudden they're like, get out, get another one, we're going again. And then it's just 100 miles an hour again. So I've officially at this point had all my classes, I've met all my professors, everybody seems wonderful. There are some professors that I think I'm really going to enjoy, some professors that I'll always respect anybody who has the knowledge and intellect to stand in front of a room and teach a hard subject. That um, but I'm excited. It's interesting material. I'm happy to see all my classmates again. It's nice just kind of catching up with all my colleagues and hearing about, like what happened over winter break. Some kids are already starting to look for, those summer internships, and like wheels are really turning. And I can, for the first time, actually feel the seedling sprouting, and like seeing, oh, this is how this is going to apply. And this is what I need to do. And these are the next steps. And it's all very tangible right in front of me. And for somebody like me, that's almost a bad thing, because it's like hanging a bone on a treadmill. It's like, now that I can see it and I know how close it is, I'm going to run even harder. So to all my classmates, I apologize. I am going to pick up the pace. However, I got big goals. So, but other than that, I'm happy more than anything. Just to be in a routine, I really enjoy like sitting down after class. And this might sound boring to some people, but I love like cracking open a textbook and spending, 2 hours reading and rereading and understanding and taking notes and engaging in the mental gymnastics that I think a lot of this material requires. And I'm learning that that's something I not only really enjoy, but I enjoy having discussions about it. So class has been way more fulfilling. I have a few professors who teach like purely Socratic, no laptops, no phones. The one professor made us take Apple watches off. And I appreciate that. I think a lot of kids, there was a lot of audible groans and this, that, or whatever, but I've always been that style. I think this is a time honored profession. It's worked for a very specific way for a very long period of time. And, I believe that I'm just as equipped as anybody else who stood in my shoes at law school, whether it was last year or 150 years ago. And, we're learning basically the same things. And I think that's the way to do it. So I'm happy. Good professors, great classmates. I think it's going to be a great semester. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's absolutely right. Like, some people are going to be turned off by like the no tech in a classroom or anything, but studies continuously show how important it is to like remove yourself from that to be able to learn. Because, and this is going to go into something that we talk about later in the show, but I think that human beings, although we've been around technology now for the technology that we know for, decades at this point, human beings are millions or hundreds of thousands of years in creation, right? Like adaptation doesn't happen over 30 years. Adaptation happens over hundreds of years. So we are still the same people like the Greeks and the Romans who, you know, would speak about things and read things and write things down, and that's how they learned, and that's how you absorb information. Still, you read, you write, you physically do whatever the thing is, right? Physically writing pen to paper is going to be better for your memory, for your engagement in the material in the long run. And it's just the way that it is. Human beings don't adapt to computers in 30 years like they did for pen and paper for most of the human civilization, like writing things down, that is, maybe not pen to
Mhm.
paper, but however it is, carving into stone. Like speaking, actually having a conversation with somebody in front of you.
Yeah, I think for me personally too, and this is the last I'll say on this before I ask you about your week, but I think the disconnect is a lot of kids, like we grew up. I think that truly our age, Gen Z, is that last, and a lot of these kids are really on the border, but that last generation of like, I'm going to call it pure human. Like, I didn't have a phone until I was in high school, like a smartphone that could connect to the internet. And, I see kids that are like, in elementary school running around with smartphones. Like their existence, the way that they're brought up is totally different. And so I know it's true for you and I. Like I learned cursive, like I learned pen to paper, and the way that that translates, it's all physiological. And like, not for nothing, the disconnect between your fingers and keys, like this means nothing. I know that this is a G when I write it. You know what I mean? Like there's that connection. It's hardwired in my brain. And what gets me too is like there's no physical work product. I can take a notebook. I can take something like, this that I've been writing in, and it's, physical. I can hold it. I can flip through the pages. I can feel what I created. I could type something on here. I close it and it disappears into the ether, and it's not tangible and it feels a little less real. So those are the reasons why I love personally the old school. I'm going to start calling it the human method of learning. Anybody who learns on a computer, you're bionic learning. You're part of the whatever the next generation of humans is going to be, the transbiotic human experiment that's going on. But me, I'll kick it old school, pen and paper, please. Thank you.
I'm kicking it old school with you, Steve. There's no stopping me. Every class, I'm the guy with the notebook. I like the traditional legal pad. I like my bold gel pens, nice bold ink. That's I function the same way. And,
Love
and
it.
to your point, I haven't had all of my classes yet, so I'm still getting to see and meet and learn my professors. I have a class tonight, actually, after recording this. That should be fun. That's my trial advocacy class, and
Mhm.
then I have a class on tomorrow that I haven't met the professor yet. It's children in the law. That should be really interesting. I read for that class already. I'm going to tell you, Steve, it's a heartbreaker. That class is going to break my heart every week. It's going to be a tough one. And then international human rights, there's a lot going on in the world right now, as we know, with international human rights. So that should be a lot of fun. And I'll be externing this semester. So I got a lot going on. I did have constitutional law, and I had my criminal procedure class already. So we're jumping right in. If you can't tell, like I'm already starting to be exhausted. But you know what? It is what it is. You get through it. I'll get into the groove. I'll kick back in and I'll be able to get through it. I only have one coffee today. So maybe that's it. Maybe I need to go get another coffee. I had a cup of tea and a coffee this morning. They say that tea has caffeine. I'm not convinced, if I'm being completely honest with you, Steven.
I think that the caffeine content is marginal, probably compared to the amounts of coffee that you're drinking or what's in a regular cup of coffee. So it certainly exists. I know that. Whether or not it's effective to you and your tolerance, or I should broadly say the tolerance of somebody, in higher education, um, that might be up for debate.
Now, Steven, really quick before we get into our story, I remember when I first actually got hooked to coffee, and it
Hmm.
was freshman year at Montclair State. We were living in the same dorm,
Yeah,
and it was probably with you that I like actually started getting coffee for real. We had a Dunkin' Donuts that was
right
directly
beneath
under
us.
us. So
Uh-huh.
we would go, we would have, a paper due or something like that. Of course, we would have a paper due like in the next week, not definitely not the next day.
No,
Definitely not the next day,
no.
mom and dad. And so it'd be like 9 o'clock at night. We would get ourselves a cup of coffee and we would write that paper in a night, early, but in a night.
Correct, correct. And we would do
And
pretty well.
I would say so. I would say so. Um, but that being said, no, definitely college got me hooked on coffee. I was scared to drink coffee because it stunts your growth. And then I kind of gave up on that once I got into college. I was like, I'm probably not going to grow much more. Might as well reap the benefits that I've been pushing off.
You locked in on your height and you said, now it's time for the energy. I get that. I
That's right.
totally get that.
That's
No,
right.
those were great days when we would grind. But you know what's again, this is actually a perfect transition into what we're going to talk about today, because I can't imagine that there's many more students. Well, I'm sure there's some like us back in the undergraduate days that were, loading up on their coffee the week before the paper was due and sitting down in a night to write it and make sure that they have a week to review it.
Sure, sure.
But
They would definitely review the paper. That was definitely something
yes,
that they would do.
yes. And I just think right now there's so many new technologies that are largely fueled by AI, where maybe some of these kids just get the coffee and press a key and then the paper's done, and they just had the coffee for the aesthetic effect.
Maybe, but you know what? Here's the thing, and that's jumping into what we're talking about, and then we're talking about AI, but we're talking about a much broader thing with AI, and I want to even expand this out even broader than everything that we're talking about. I really want to take a bird's eye view here and maybe talk about it in a philosophical sense. But basically, the New Jersey legislature, along with our congressional delegation out in DC, are putting together legislation and really, really positive and good legislation, in my opinion. Something really disturbing and disgusting happened in the state of New Jersey in high school, which we'll get into. And this is a case of our legislators seeing a problem before it becomes even more serious than it already is and trying to find a solution to it. And that problem is with AI technology, specifically AI generated pornography. So there's this case out of Westfield High School in which school age children uh, basically took a classmate and created this AI generated pornography using this classmate's features. It looked just like her, and these boys. Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe they were like 14 years old
Yep.
at the time that this happened, and so these 14-year-old these children were able to create these AI generated pornographic images of their classmate. Obviously, this is bullying, but it's just so much more violative than just standard bullying, which is also bad and wrong. And things and stories like this have been proliferating since technology became a thing. You think of like uh, photographs of classmates that would go around and that type of bullying, and everybody's heard those stories. But this is even more violative than that because it's there is no control that the person that these depictions are of that they have over it. Like, they didn't take any pictures, they didn't do anything. They were innocent, just a 14-year-old girl minding her own business, and her classmates did this. And what her classmates did was disgusting and awful and wrong, and it's a scary thing. But it's something that we have to confront in this new world of AI technology that we're entering for everyone, not obviously for children, but for men and women of all ages, right? Now this is real life. This is a reality that we're going to have to deal with. And Mikey Sherrill, along with Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, along with Congressman Tom Keene, are trying to put bills together to prevent this type of thing from happening again, as along with a New Jersey state senator, Senator Corrado, who is also trying to crack down on these harmful technologies in the name and to help the family that was attacked in this scenario. So Tom Keene, if you're not aware, is a Republican. Mike Sherrill is a Democrat. Senator Corrado is a Republican. So all of these people, this is completely bipartisan effort. It's exactly what it should be. And before we get into this broader discussion, Stephen, if you have anything to add, anything more you want to jump in and talk about.
I think for me, and my comments I think are going to be more in the general sphere of questions and answers about how do we go about addressing this issue. This is something personally, AJ. I know you and I have talked off show and a little bit on show, but I think that this is a really interesting and an innovative area of law, legislation, enforcement. I think it's going to pose a lot of questions, and it's actually one of the topics that makes me really excited to be a law student right now, and somebody that in the next at this point 2 to 4 years, hopefully I can use my skills, my opinions, and my ability to be an advocate to have meaningful change in this area and really help shape the discourse about how we look at these issues, how we think about these issues, and how we punish people who abuse AI for what are really heinous crimes against individuals. So I think with regard to specifically this, though, the fact that New Jersey, we're stepping out, we're taking this, and we're being bipartisan about it, proves to me that this is an issue that everybody cares about across party lines. Everybody should, and I don't want to sound like fear mongering almost, but you should be a little bit worried about how far AI can go before the reins of government are able to, latch into it and pull it back and make it a safe and reliable and resourceful tool for the general public, because this is just one example in one state of a really malicious way to use this technology. And I think it's, we can have, like you said, we're going to have a bigger discussion about this in a moment, but I'm just happy that our representatives, the congressmen, the state senators are going out and they're seeking to correct this wrong. And it just breaks my heart because, again, we're talking about children. Also, you're talking about 14-year-olds. This is the same group of people that, maybe I was talking about it jokingly before, but these kids grew up on the internet. These kids have had access to these things for a very long time. Like, it's not unreasonable to assume that there is, somewhere out there, a 14-year-old who's spent half of their life on the internet. Maybe your parents are letting you watch YouTube at 7, like whatever it might be. You know how to navigate. You become familiar with these things passively just because of the way that content is sort of like streamed in front of your face. So we have a very capable and intelligent generation coming up, and they're being given very powerful and unregulated tools that they can obviously harness and use for malicious purpose. So I think that's the real interest here, is protecting the children and making sure that these technologies aren't proliferated and used to have negative effects over any portion of life. We could go as far as deep fakes, and we're going to see videos of people. I've seen a deep fake video of Joe Biden, same thing of Donald Trump. Like, if you don't know, if you're not privy, if these things aren't labeled as AI, the misinformation campaign that's possible with this technology is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And the harm that it's able to affect onto individuals, communities, and groups of people, I would say, is also unlike anything we've ever seen before. So I really appreciate these senators, these Congress people taking the initiative, recognizing this issue for what it is, and attempting to be at least on the ball, because this is not an issue we want to be behind the ball on at all.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and you're going to see this problem. This is something that we talk a lot about in school, and we've talked a lot about in general, is this idea that technology is always going to be advancing past legislation. So legislators are always going to have to play catch up to technological advancements. They always have, they always will. Um, and one thing about this is that they're connecting this to a revenge porn statute, basically treating it like it's revenge pornography, and it would be treated in the same class as that. But what I want to talk about is, this is awful because it is directly, you can point to a victim to this crime. You could say she was affected negatively because of this. But here's my thing, Stephen. When it comes to AI generated pornography, especially AI generated child pornography, even if it wasn't, based off of the likeness of somebody directly that you can point to and you could say, hey, this is the problem here, this is the victim, look right there. It's still a wrong. And it's still a bad, because and it's still something that we should address. Because here's the thing about people in general too. It's, we are what we think about. We are what we look at. We are the products that we consume. And the problem, and this is something that you and I think, actually our youth and experiences being young adults in this world that we live in today, I think actually helps us more than in a lot of other areas in politics. I think in a lot of other areas in politics, wisdom and age and living a long life helps you. But something like this, I think being young, especially young men, um, really, really it gives us a unique perspective on this. Um, because, like you said, these young people have been on the internet for most of their lives. They've been exposed to things on the internet since they were preteens, before that, probably before they hit puberty. And if you look at the numbers, and it's quite disturbing, children, young children, before they even reach maturity of puberty, are being exposed to pornography. And if you don't think that that is shaping these young men into things, into acting in ways that are not good, they're not virtuous, you have another thing coming, right? You could be the most libertarian minded person on the planet. I guarantee you don't want 7-year olds looking at porn. Okay. And they are. And if you don't think that that has a direct impact on actions like this, like taking your classmate's likeness and making deep fake AI generated porn, it does. Because things like this happen and they evolve and it becomes worse and more sadistic. And you're seeing these problems not just in the United States, you're seeing these problems in Japan, you're seeing these problems across the globe. And it all comes back to this fact that young people are being exposed to this at such a young age, and now you're adding this whole other element of, well, it's all computer generated. It's not really hurting anyone. This idea of a victimless crime when it's AI generated, and it's all, to quote the president of the United States, it's all a bunch of malarkey, if you ask me. Like, first of all, I'm not too sure there's anything that's a victimless crime. I'm not sure if I buy into that nomenclature as is. But this particularly is not a victimless crime. There is a victim to this crime in this scenario, and it's that young girl. But it's also those young men. They are also victims to this crime. They're victims to the crime of being exposed to pornography at such a young age and such an impressionable age. And it is going to lead to such negative consequences that we need to address this head on. It does not take a rocket scientist to see what's coming down the pike with this AI technology, and we have to prevent it from happening. Because some people are going to sit here and argue, well, if you let the person who's a pedophile watch AI generated child pornography, they won't harm real children. They won't do real. And I'm going to tell you this right now: that is not the case. It will just embolden them further. If you know anything about that, like literally, if you know anything about this, it starts with a lot of pedophilia starts by watching child pornography and then advancing into actually taking actions against children. And now they're going to start with AI generated child pornography, make their way into actual child pornography, and then start abusing and then start actually touching and abusing children as is. That is how this course of events is going to take place. I'm not like it does not take a rocket scientist. It doesn't take a lawyer. It doesn't take a legislator. It takes literally anybody who's ever dealt with people, that's dealt with themselves, right? Just think about little things on your own, where it's like you start off small. Maybe you start off with, a bite of cake, and before you know it, you're eating the whole thing, right? And this might be a trivial example, but I think it's true nonetheless. You started off with a flip phone so that you can call your mom when you made it to the park across the street. And now the only thing you do, if you don't have your phone on you, it's like you've lost your life support, right? Things start small, they get big. And so we have to cut this off as quick as we can.
I think so. You made a lot of brilliant points. You made a lot of things that I definitely want to speak on. I think first and foremost, what I think you said that was most important was that this isn't a victimless crime, right? And in this particular notion, I agree with you. The 14-year-old girl who had these images made of her is a victim. But I like what you said about the young gentlemen, presumably gentlemen, but the young individuals engaging in the creation of these things. And this might be a conversation that, people find uncomfortable. Nobody wants to talk about explicit images and pornography and these offensive, things. But I think in order to have progress, in order to be forthcoming and facilitate a really productive conversation, I'm personally willing to share or reveal a little bit about this. I'm not going to sit here and kid people and I'm a grown man. Sure, these are, I've seen pornographic images, and I would consider myself similarly a victim of being exposed to this kind of content at a young age. I remember the first time that I saw porn. It was not something that I sought out. And once you realize how damaging those images are, and the stories that they portray, and the expectations that they place onto young men, and how they should or are expected to view and treat women, is really damaging to the ability for young men to form meaningful relationships with women and see them as, you know, people, as opposed to these objects for pleasure, these people that are supposed to appear in these images for your pleasure. And when you plant that seed young, and we're talking, these kids are 14 and they're going out of their way to create these images, that the law prescribes you're not even allowed to know or see what this is until you're 18, but you're 14 and you're making it of somebody else. That's indicative of a huge problem. So I think if we're going to have this conversation, I agree with you. We do need to explore, and there needs to be better lines drawn on how we're going to protect children on the internet, period. I know you're also familiar with this, but there was a pretty big investigative report that came out a few weeks ago where, and this is actually admitted in court cases, and I would be willing to, once the show's over, go ahead and find the cases and we could bring it up next week. But there was major, platforms like Pornhub that had admitted in certain states, once they pass these, regulations that require strict ID requirements for individuals to access their sites, some of these places, their visitation went down by more than half. Like, you're talking over 50%, and they admit that these are children that are viewing this explicit content. And so I agree with you. What we have now with AI is the next step in that progression that is just going to continue to be this poison and pollute the minds of young people all over, and prevent them from having meaningful relationships and viewing people as individuals. And it's a really toxic and disgusting situation. The other thing that I want to talk about with regard to this is this specific case. I agree with you. I think that there is very clearly victims here. But what I grapple with a lot in my head, and this is something I would hope to someday, write about and do some real research and, put a lot of time into a thought piece on this. But the way that AI works, I think that there's so many victims. Even if the actual image that's created might not be the likeness of a real person. I was turned on to this because I was having a conversation with our mutual friend Nick about a story where it was a gentleman who had created AI child porn, but it wasn't based off of anybody. And I kind of walked through the motions, and maybe I was a little bit lawyerly, but I was like, well, there's no actual child, so is there a victim? And what's so heinous about child porn versus regular porn? Well, it's the fact that it's a child who's victimized, and society deems that as something that is, worthy of more punishment. But if there's not actually a child, is it just to punish that person the same way as if there was? And I don't know what the right answer to that is. But what I thought was very interesting was, if you understand how AI works and how it puts together these images, it sources this data from the unlimited amount of images that are available, to these databases online. So I would have an issue if I found out that AI had maybe sourced an image that I post on, Facebook 5 years ago, and even if they took a megabyte of that data and turned maybe, the corner of the toe on this, AI generated child porn, but it was derived from an image that I had put on the internet. My likeness, my data was accessed and used to create something explicit, illegal, something that I clearly had no intention of my likeness being used to create. I think that's a wrong committed onto that person. And those people also deserve to be protected from their likeness, their data being used to create these disgusting, abhorrent images. So there's so many variables and factors and things to consider. And I say all of this again to just reaffirm what you said in the beginning. law, legislation, enforcement is always going to be a little bit behind the ball, but this is one that I truly believe we cannot get too far behind, because the ability to inflict damage and really cause irreparable harm to a generation of children is right in front of our face. We see it developing, and I appreciate and I applaud Keen, Corrado, anybody who is working diligently to do what we need to do to protect not only innocent people from their data being used and compiled into these illicit images, but the people that are the true victims of this, like this 14-year-old girl that we spoke about earlier. So it's a pretty loaded issue, and I think there's a lot of things to discuss.
Yeah, certainly. There is a lot here. This is a disgusting issue. I think you're absolutely right. We should be proud of and commending the fact that these legislators are taking this and they've seen a problem and they're addressing it as best they can. We can't be naive enough to think that one piece of legislation, whether it's federal or statewide, is going to fix all these problems. It's simply not going to happen. But we need to step in front of it. We need to do everything we can to prevent these. And I think something else, it's imperative on us, on not just Stephen and I, because we have a platform that we can talk about this, but on parents to children, on people to their peers, to talk about these types of issues. And it is an uncomfortable issue to talk about, and it is kind of weird to talk about. But why is it uncomfortable? Why is it weird? Because we know there's something wrong. Because we know that there's something wrong with this. So we have to go out of our way as individuals in the society to live in a society that we want to live in. And like I said, Stephen, and I think this is the point, and unfortunately we can't go super long, but I'm sure we'll have many more conversations in the future about this type of stuff. What you consume is what you become. That's everything. What you eat, what you watch, what you read, who you talk to, who you're around, going outside when the sun's out, down to that. What you take in is who you are. If you want to be a good and virtuous and happy person, living a good, virtuous, and happy life, trying to do what's best for everyone and for yourself, you have to consume things that are good and virtuous and happy. And to pretend that this is anything other than a direct cause of the oversaturation and overabundance of pornographic images and violent pornographic images that are on the internet as is, that young people are being shown, and it's like directly in their face all of the time. It's foolish to think it's anything other than that, and wrong. And I don't care how much you think you love freedom. I don't care how much you think you love freedom. That's not freedom. That's not liberty. That's licentiousness. And look across history. It is not in the free societies where these types of things, these types of violent sexual proclivities arise. It's at the detriment of them. It's when they start to fall. That's what happens. And that's what we're seeing right here. So let's get out in front of it and stop it from happening.
I could not have said any of that better. And I just want to double down. And I think my biggest message on everything that you've said there is it is uncomfortable. These are not easy conversations to have. And I'm not going to lie with you. Sometimes when I'm down here, like I mentioned that this was a case that we had. I think we spoke about it on this show about the gentleman that created the AI porn and was sentenced to 40 years in jail. And I walked into law school the next day and I asked my classmates, I said, what do you think of this? Like, what do you guys make of this? Is this a just punishment? Is this how our system should handle this? And a lot of people were not really interested in the mental gymnastics that I think an issue like this requires, because, you don't want to sit down and talk about AI porn with your buddies, and you don't want to have that conversation if you're a parent with your 14-year-old daughter, with your 10-year-old son, with whoever it is. But oftentimes, and this is bigger than this conversation, this is true in life, I believe, you have to push through that discomfort. whatever it is, whether it's a conversation, whether it's you're trying to run a marathon and mile 13 is beating you down. You got to push through. You got to do the hard thing, because if you don't do the hard thing, it's going to win. And this is not a battle that we can afford to lose. So it's up to us. It's up to the people that have platforms, and it's up to everybody. I agree with you, to facilitate these conversations. Be honest, be open, be vulnerable, because that's what allows for connection. And once we can all connect on the same level about this issue and about what it means for our society at large, which you did a tremendous job at detailing, I think then we can begin even more fast and forward on the progress towards defeating this, because AI is not something that's just going to go away. These issues are not just going to, oh, we'll not think about it for a few weeks and we won't ever hear a story like this. I guarantee you'll hear 5 more stories like this. And then a few more months after that, it's going to be 15 more stories like this. And it's going to continue to happen. And I think the worst part is you and I can sit here. We are about halfway through the first month of 2024, and we can identify this issue. We can be ahead of it. We can have this conversation. I think it's time for the rest of the country, for the listeners, the legislators, to continue to do what they are doing. But this can't be a silent battle at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. And I will say before we wrap up, that story that you talked about where Pornhub, the higher ups at Pornhub is basically all but admitted that a lot of their traffic onto the website has been underage because of decisions by the Virginia legislature, the Utah legislature, right? And losing large swaths of their viewing base because of these age restrictions and requirements. That should tell you all you need to know about the issue. That should tell you all you need to know about how nefarious the actors here are. But look, Steve, we gotta cut it. We both have school to attend to. I got
Yes.
class in a little bit. You got homework to do. So look, it's been another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. As always, check us out on demand on anytime on OnNJ. You can check out Real Talk with Fernando, the Nader Narrative, and you can sign the pledge and sign up for our newsletter on jerseyfirst.org. We're going to have many more conversations like this. Unfortunately, these are the types of conversations you want to have, but these are the conversations you have to have. So with that, for Jersey First, I'm AJ Malillo.
I'm Steven Rambolo.
And we hope you have a wonderful week, everybody. And really quick before we go, shout out to Congresswoman Cheryl, Congressman Keene, and Senator Corrado for doing the right thing and stepping up for the people in New Jersey.